Hi, welcome to CCTV, Channel 17, live at 525, the Preservation Burlington show. Everybody, welcome back. We've been on hiatus for a few months because of the holidays and the elections and stuff like that, so it's really good to be back. Preservation Burlington is a nonprofit 501c3 organization whose mission is to preserve and protect the historic architecture and livability of Burlington. I'll memorize this one of these days. Through education and advocacy. So the show is a big education component of that. And I would like to thank David Cawley for being here with me. And just by way of background, I know that, was it 2 years ago that, or I forget when we did the Winterlude the first time, when we teamed up. And
this will be our third year this year. Okay. So we started actually in the height of COVID with our first festival. So we couldn't do quite, everything was self-directed.
Yep.
But yeah, it was 3 years ago, our first one.
And that's when we met and we set up the table there in Preservation Burlington. We've teamed up on the cemetery tours now.
Yeah, Greenmount Cemetery tours. So we've done 2 of those, which were very well attended.
Yep, very popular. People talk about it. We love doing those anyway. But anyway, thank you for coming on and doing the show.
My pleasure.
We're going to do the Winterlude again this year.
Yep.
We'll set up a tent and have our stuff and our swag, and we'll there'll be hot cocoa.
Oh, we have. I'll go through. We have lots of things planned this year, so we'll give you some of the highlights as we go along here.
Cool, and we'll push that towards the end, right? Because I really want to, I want to thank you for sending me that PowerPoint that you've put together, but tell us a little bit about the old East End. Everybody knows the old North End. Everybody knows the new North End. Mm-hmm. Not everybody's heard about the old East End. And I love your stickers.
Yeah. Well, place names are funny because, what was a place name, 50 or 100 years ago may not be the place name today. I mean, think about the old North End. Mm-hmm. There was no old North End till there was a new North End.
Right, right, exactly.
And so that's I lived in this neighborhood, the old East End, for 30 years. And it's a place where people really didn't know what the name of the neighborhood was. And so when I retired about 5 years ago, I got in touch with a guy named Jim Barr, and he lives down on Chase Street. And his family has been in that neighborhood for 6 generations. It goes back to the 1830s.
Oh, wow.
And he told me that his family has always referred to that neck of the woods as the Old East End. And it's had lots of names. So we'll talk about it. I've got some slides that show, where it is. But, for people that know Burlington, as you travel down Colchester Avenue headed towards Winooski, that is the Old East End neighborhood. And sometimes people think it's even part of Winooski because it's, some of the structures are the same. They're right across the river.
Very similar, right next to each other on the river.
Similar histories there. Mm-hmm. So that's why when we started researching it, we realized there was unique things about this neighborhood as part of itself and unique to Burlington's history too. So that's what got us going on it.
So that got us going on it. So is that what how did you stumble on where was your first interest? You retired, you had time on your hands.
Yeah.
And
and it was really just one of the great things about retirement is you get to go for walks. And so I started doing walks. I live fairly close to Greenmount Cemetery. Okay. And in Greenmount Cemetery, we know, is the Ethan Allen Monument.
Yeah, yeah.
And lots of historic, headstones there.
Yep.
And so that made me start thinking a little bit more. I wanted to know the story about, what was the Allen connection to this neighborhood? Because I really didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so then I began also in these walks looking at some of the structures and realizing that some of these, and one that we'll take a look at, goes all the way back to 1790. On Colchester Avenue, the building's still there today.
Is this the blacksmith shop?
No, this was called Ames Tavern. Mm. And it was in 1790. This was the major route to Canada. Yeah. So as a tavern, that's where people would stop and spend the night, get their refreshments, and move on over.
Right. So there was probably not very much anywhere else in the vicinity.
Right. That was it. Actually, there was with a little bit more research, it turned out there was 2 or 3 other taverns that popped up. Because it was a little bit of a place where people congregated because you had to get across the river.
Yep.
But there was no bridge in the early days. And so Ethan Allen's brother, Ira Allen, started a ferry across the river over to the Winooski side. And of course, that was called Colchester back then.
Yep.
And so that's why that was the connection, that this road, that it was Colchester Avenue, didn't actually extend all the way down to the river as it does today, because the bridge wasn't there.
Yep.
It curved, and that's what is what we call Chase Street today.
Chase Street, okay.
And the end of Chase Street was where Ira Allen's ferry crossed over to the Winooski River.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
All right, well, we just pulled up the Old East End.
Yeah. So, so as we talked about, where is the Old East End? Well,
Yeah.
it's that neighborhood. What makes it kind of unique is it juts out into the Winooski River there.
Yep.
And the river is coming in from the right and going downstream, makes this big bend there. And everybody who's ever paddled knows that rivers on the inside curve are the most powerful. And so that's why the mills were sited. The mills were sited on both sides of the river, but there was quite a few mills on the Burlington side of the river because of the power of the river
Taking
there.
advantage of that water power.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, that's where that comes from. So this is a view today. Now, other parts of, so what makes the whole neighborhood? Well, some of the original, the way the properties were laid out back then, they extended from the river toward the downtown area. And these properties, you know, were, you know, kind of ended about where East Ave is today.
Okay.
So East Ave forms one boundary of the neighborhood, and then the river forms the northern boundary of the neighborhood. And you know, approximately Route 89 is it. So it's a bit of a triangle of this neighborhood. And, you know, we'll talk about some of the connections about how this property was evolved and developed that made it, you know, a common place.
So, yeah, you know, we all have heard that Ira Allen bought up all the land there.
Right.
And then, so when you say these plots were divided like that, who divided those plots up? He was speculating, right?
Right. When he bought the lots, they were already lined up. So the original charter for Burlington, of course, was 1763.
Yeah.
And the original layout of those lots happened then. But he and his brothers, Ira and Ethan, and his other brothers, formed the Onion River Land Company. And they not only bought that land, they bought pretty much everything up and down the Winooski River. So as he came to the river, and I think we've got a slide there, yeah. Actually, one of the quotes from his autobiography is he called this place, where the falls are and this part of the river, the land that my soul delighted in. And what that vision was he saw enterprise here. He knew the falls were powerful. He knew that the river goes out to the lake and that the lake feeds to Canada. And so he could see a whole enterprise, you know, developing here before anybody saw it.
He saw a natural highway.
He saw a natural highway and business with Canada. And that was the only, you know, business in the area. So he and his cousin, remember Baker, came to the falls in 1772.
Wait, I have to say it.
Yeah.
I remember Baker.
There you go. You
I
can't
had to,
forget.
I had to do that. Right, sorry.
He was cousin to Ethan Allen and Ira Allen. And
all Connecticut boys, right?
yeah, all the Litchfield area. In fact, many of the people we talk about that settled in this area all came from that area. They knew each other from that area. So when, you know, the Allens, you know, saw this as a big business opportunity, they sold it to their friends, and they all came. And people intermarried. There were, you know, sisters were marrying brothers, and all of that. So it was a tight-knit group. So they came in 1772, and Burlington only had a couple of farms at that point that had been, you know, sold and settled. So there was no, it was still frontier.
Yep.
Now, his vision for this enterprise really didn't get a chance to get developed. They built a blockhouse, and the blockhouse wasn't really to protect them from the Native Americans. It was to prevent the Yorkers, who were also claiming these lands at the same time. So that was part
Weren't they in the? Wasn't the Yorkers? I remember seeing that at the Ethan Allen homestead.
Yeah.
Ira did not like. Ethan did not like the Yorkers.
Oh no.
And then New Hampshire was also laying claim to this area.
Well, that's where the Allens had bought their claims, and the claims that were settled here were the New Hampshire grants. And so the Yorkers also, particularly in the southern part of the state, southwestern part of the state, started laying over their claims as well. They claimed they owned everything to the Connecticut River. The Yorkers did.
Yeah.
And so, but the Allens, that was the beginning of the Green Mountain Boys, was to fight the claims of the Yorkers and to try to kick them out.
Yes. Right.
And that's what Ira was doing here in Winooski. In fact, when they arrived in 1772, there was a Yorker surveyor party here that they waited for an ambush, and they told them to leave town.
And chase him out of
They
town.
chased them out.
Oh,
Yeah.
too funny.
So there was these early things, but then everything went on hold for the Revolutionary War because the British were coming down and their Native American allies were beginning to raid. So everybody pulled back to the southern part of the state, and this place stayed frontier until after the war. And then Ira came back in about 1783. And that's when the real development of mills and all those things, started taking place. He developed that ferry we talked about and those sorts of things. This is a representation of a map. This was done by historian David Blow, and it kind of represents this part of the town in 1795. And as I talked about, if you see at the lower part of the picture, there's today's Colchester Avenue, but it curves into Chase Street because it's headed on down to the ferry. To the left of the ferry there, Ira Allen had built a dam, and that's how they got
Power for
more of the power that they needed. Plus, it created a mill pond behind the dam, so the ferry
made the ferry a lot easier
made the
to
ferry
operate.
to operate there. And so, their first enterprise really was timbering and building rafts of logs that they could ship to Canada. And so that was all being done in this area at that time.
So I'm cheating because we talked about this a little bit
Yeah,
before
sure.
we got on here, but I see the name Rolling Place there.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned these rafts of logs and the timbering, and we were talking
Well,
about
so
that
there was
industry.
so much tall timber here, and basically it was called the rolling place because they cut the trees and would roll it down the hill. This was behind Green Mountain Cemetery. It would roll down through what is today Szymanska Park,
Right.
out to the river, and then flow down over the falls, and then they'd assemble those rafts.
Really steep right there behind the cemetery.
Yeah. So that's, and there are a lot of hills, up along in the Centennial Woods area. So it was all that lumbering that was taken. So that was their first enterprise.
Dump it into the river.
Yep.
And then it would flow down.
They would tie it all together into rafts, and big rafts. I mean, big enough that they would put shanties on them. And they had, they would also export, like people were making potash and other exports going to Canada. They'd take all that up on
Using
the
them as
raft.
barges at the same time.
Yeah, it was kind of like a barge that they chip up there.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So here's an example of one of those, not their raft, but something of the era that you might see
Yep.
shipping the everything there. Well, he had this great vision. Ira had this great vision of enterprise, but it didn't always pan out. He was short on money. He was rich in land, short in cash, and a lot of times they'd ship all these things to Canada. They'd get them all the way to Montreal, and they wouldn't get the dollars that they thought they were going to get. So the businesses started, he started going into a lot of debt. So the interesting part of the story and how it relates to our neighborhood, besides Ethan Allen, which Ethan died. He moved to Burlington.
Yep.
He lived here for a couple of years, and which is the Ethan Allen homestead today. And he died in 1789. That there's a record of that funeral procession. So he laid in state at Ira Allen's house in Winooski. The Green Mountain Boys came. It was supposed to be close to like 10,000 people. And it was in February, so the river was frozen. They marched across the river and up Colchester Avenue to the cemetery. And it was a cadence where they would stop every 10 paces or so and fire a gun in honor of Ethan Allen, and then they would move on. So the other interesting thing about the Ethan Allen Monument is this year, July 4th, is the 150th anniversary of that monument.
Monument going in.
Yeah. So we're looking for partners. Maybe we should put on.
We'll do another.
Some kind of ceremony.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So we'll take a look at that. So what happened? Businesses were starting to go down. The rest of the Allen brothers died off. And Ira and his brother Levi were the only brothers left. But the families of the other brothers that died said they had rights to the property that were bought by this company. And so they ended up suing Ira Allen to get some of this land.
Now this is late 1700s?
Yeah, this is about starting in 1795 and moving up to right around 1800. There was a number of court cases that took place over this. One of the relatives that sued was a woman named Lucinda Allen, and she was the daughter of Heman Allen and niece to Ira Allen. She married a guy named Moses Catlin. And the Catlins actually took Ira Allen's vision, but by winning the case that they owned this property, and the property that's the old East End, the Catlins took over. That whole section where the mills would be, that was their land, all the way up the hill, including where Mary Fletcher Hospital is, the UVM hospital and what was Mary Fletcher Hospital. Everybody always thinks of that as being Hospital Hill, but actually the first residents there were the Catlin family, and back then it was known as Catlin Hill. The Catlins were the ones that sold that property to the Fletchers to create the first hospital. And these are some of the other dwellings that are in Burlington that one of the famous ones is the Johnson House on Main Street, part of UVM. Well, that house was originally a Catlin house. It was located on the corner of Prospect and Main Street, where the Wheeler House is today. It moved over to where the Morrell building is, and then it was transferred over here. So the Catlins owned that house. And so he had a brother, this was Moses Catlin and Guy Catlin. They were the real entrepreneurs that made the mills work in the early 1800s. So this is a representative.
That was that transition, right, from the Allens to the
Catlins.
Right about that, 1700s into the 1800s. Now it was a new generation.
And actually, Ira Allen sort of left the area in poverty in 1803, and he went to Philadelphia.
And I remember reading about that. Sort of bankrupt. And
so one example of this representation here is the mills right along the river. That left side with the circle around it is a group of buildings, and was called the Flouring Mill. So the first one there was in 1813, and then floods, fires. They keep having to rebuild that mill on the corner. But by the late 1800s, it looks something like this. So this shot that you see is looking into Winooski. That would be the Winooski Bridge. And the building to the left right there is the Flouring Mill. So this was shot in about 1880s. One other note for this building, just a little after this picture was taken, they put in an electric dynamo. It was the first municipal electric production in Burlington and in Vermont.
Off the Winooski River.
Off the Winooski River right there. And it was running electric trolleys that were going along Riverside Avenue. So that was one of its claims to fame there.
Which we really want to go back to soon, right? The electric trolleys.
Exactly. Yeah, we had a whole network of them. So, these are just some more examples of old buildings that are still there today. And I think that was the part that really intrigued me when I retired, is just walking around and all of a sudden realizing, wow, this is buildings from 1810, this building's from 1822. And what they were used for. What's labeled there as the Reuben Harmon store is a Domino's Pizza. Right on the corner there.
The blacksmith shop, I remember seeing that at the Design Advisory Board. And they did a lot of work and a lot of renovations in there. There's another restoration contractor did it. The gaming room is down there now, right?
The boardroom, right.
The boardroom.
And that was the building they raised because after the flood, they built a new road, and it was only a one-story building at the time, and then they've raised. It's actually 3 stories. You see 2 above grade,
and then it goes
one
down
below grade there.
The hill,
and the tavern that I mentioned is that one at 411 Colchester Avenue. And that
was one of the first taverns, or one of that group of taverns that sprang up.
That's the earliest one that we know of. There, And Edwin Chase House on 21 Chase Street.
Love that house.
That's the home of Jim Barr, the family who has six generations living in the neighborhood. So it's got quite a bit there. So there's more to learn.
So much. There's so much to dive into there. And I know, since I've been here about 25 years or so, I've always ended up down in that neighborhood, either working for folks or, and it's just fun the way it meanders and the roads. It's not really a grid, it's just kind of follows the lay of the land.
It
if
did
you will.
from the original roads, and the housing that really sprung up there. A lot of it's from the late 1800s because that's when the mills took off. So these were sort of small scale mills that the Catlin family had. So you might have 10 to 40 people.
Yep.
But then when the large mills started, one of the biggest mills came in 1836. And then, of course, the Civil War really increased the demand.
Yep.
And so all of that housing there was for workers, for the
it was
mills.
a big explosion, big industrial area.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution was happening right there.
Exactly.
We've got a few more minutes. Let's see. Okay. You've got this up. Let's talk about. This is some of the things we've done. There's the tour of Greenmount Cemetery.
Yep.
We're going to do an Ethan Allen thing now that we know that's coming up.
And it was just
there's your sticker. I love that logo.
Yeah, that's kind of a.
Who did your logo?
One of the members of our group, Holly Hickman. She's actually a professional, and she does this as a profession, but she's a volunteer in our group. And just as when she moved into the neighborhood, she went around. She said, "I need something that gives us a feel for the neighborhood."
Yeah.
But we did the survey of the neighborhood, and we said that 90% of the people didn't know what the name was. So we formed a group, and it's called the Old East End Neighborhood Coalition. And we started sponsoring some of these events. We have a mural that's we put up, and doing the winter festival.
Yeah.
So we have a few minutes to talk about the winter festival.
let's get into that because that's coming up soon too, right?
Right. It's going to be February 3rd.
Yep.
It's a Friday evening, so that's going to be 5 to 7.
Yep.
And then the next day, February 4th, it goes from 10 to 2.
Yep.
Now, it takes place in Szymanska Park.
Yep.
And we try to have a whole slew of activities that we'll talk about here to try to attract people down to the park. But it's really a celebration.
Is Bernie really going to be there?
We always get them to sit on the roof.
That's terrific. That's great.
That was the first year that meme was really pretty popular.
Of course, right.
One of the first things we did, we have a really good working relationship with Burlington Parks and Recreation.
Yep.
And so we got together with them saying, can we do some things to try to decorate the barn? Because there's a barn in this park, and it's part of that original farmland that was producing flour for the mill, wheat and flour. And so we put the lights on the barn. We also make these lanterns that we decorate with vellum lanterns, and they have these little LED candles, and they get lit all around the park. So that Friday night, we have a lot of illumination going on.
Yeah.
So we're trying to say, hey, it's winter, but let's bring some light into
It's really fun. It's a great. It's a great time. The fire pit.
We have a fire pit. Yeah,
very popular.
And so we were able to get permits from the city for the fire, so we keep that going. So it's a nice place for people to congregate. As you mentioned,
they bring the Parks and Rec brings a bunch of stuff like snowshoes and skis for folks to try out.
We have snowshoes, skis, sleds, all for free. And the park is really good for beginners because it's flat.
Yeah.
And so we cut some trails to make it easier.
Go up by the trees there. You can
down.
come down a little bit.
Yeah, there's the ski slope. We have refreshments, so there'll be hot cider, hot chocolate, cookies, and there'll be some chilies and things like that to munch on. There's two groups that play. So we have Samba Tucata, which is a salsa band, lots of rhythm. You maybe remember them from last year. And they come out. It's last year it was 25. This year it's going to be 15. It's going to be cool out there. You're going to wrap yourself up.
Bundle up.
But there's places to go. You can go in the barn. We have that open, so it's a nice warming area. We've got the fire.
It's nice in there. Yeah. There's a restroom in there, if I remember.
There is. There's two restrooms in there. We've been working with some of the seniors organizations, and they're bringing some folks down, transporting them down, and some of them are going to try out some of the skiing.
Oh,
so
wow.
we'll
see how that works.
Turns out. But yeah, this was a couple shots of people just enjoying, being outside in a warm
and bonding. And like you said, the first year was COVID, so everybody was desperate to interact and be in an outdoor safe space where you could hang around.
Yeah.
And, just have fun and
it's really
get
good.
back out there. That was great.
Yeah.
No, this is going to be. We've still got 3 minutes, so if you have more pictures, but I really hopefully we're going to do this again soon because, I mean, we've got so much to talk about. And
Yeah.
it's been really fun collaborating with you guys, you know, Preservation Burlington. You know, sometimes we feel like a little bit sequestered over there. You know, either we're dealing with advocacy stuff or trying to come up with like the next walking tour or something. And to know that there's another group out there that's got the same interests, you're doing all the heavy lifting for the history and, you know, and pulling events together.
Yeah.
It's really fun for us to
I
team
think
up
there's
with
a
you.
lot of opportunities to collaborate. And what we keep finding every time we do these events is that people are always really pleased, you know, to learn about this and to participate in this. And can we do more of this? And people are saying, can we do this in our neighborhood? And so it's great. It's something that's really, you know, been well received.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to work together, and we have to encourage the new North Enders to get their group together to start.
I'm sure
you know,
there's plenty
the
of
hockey
history out there
houses.
too.
Yeah, you know, there's this whole wave of development that happens, you
Yeah.
know, and people, and that's the bigger thing, you know, people think of Burlington, they think of downtown, and a little bit they think of the old North End, because those are the famous chunks of where the density is, you know. But,
Yeah.
but what you guys have brought to the table and all this research you've done, it just shows, I mean, and it's arguably an older history, you know, that's where Burlington really started.
Well, in
you
some
know?
ways, we try to pitch it as the birthplace of Burlington.
Right, right.
People
it feels
wouldn't
like
think
it
that.
was, you know.
But because of that attraction of the mills and the river, that's where the enterprise started long before the Burlington waterfront got underway.
Yeah, in those late 1800s,
Yeah.
you see the lumber
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
there, you
Yeah.
know. But prior to that,
Yeah.
it was starting up here in
Yeah.
the river where it was a
Yeah.
natural highway,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, and there's some interesting stories. And maybe another thing that we can think about for the future. The Black Snake Affair, are you familiar
Yes.
with that?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That kind of took place in our neighborhood too, with some of these same characters. The Catlins were involved in that as well. So
The name's familiar.
yeah. So we might explore that.
We have another show or two to do, I think. You know, again, thanks, Dave, for coming on.
My pleasure. I
And doing
appreciate
this.
it.
I'm really looking forward to the Winterlude. It's going to be fun this year.
And
Me Bob
it's
will be
free. We just encourage everybody to come out and enjoy the afternoon or the evening.
Yeah, it's great. And I'd like to thank everybody for tuning back in to CCTV Live at 525 in the Preservation Burlington. For more information on Burlington, the history, our tours and events, or to get a marker for your historic house, go to preservationburlington.org, and we'll pull up the, you guys have a website too,
I
right?
think it's on the screen right now.
There it is right now, oldeastendbtv.com.
Yeah.
So you can go to those two places and learn about a lot of stuff and the things we're doing together. Thanks everybody for tuning in.